You're listening to GameCon Radio, your music source for the gaming community. The opinions and views expressed in the following presentation do not necessarily reflect those of GameCon Radio or its affiliates.
It is 10 o'clock, and that can only mean one thing. It's time for the Dr. William Lester Show, live from the ATL. That's right, Dr. William Lester can be heard every Saturday night, 10 to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time here at GameCon Radio. Please join us as the good doctor interviews the very best in the paranormal, UFO, and cryptozoology fields. So smoke them if you got them, pour something really nice to drink, and sit back and get ready for 2 full hours of stimulating conversation. The Dr. William Lester Show begins now.
From the city of Atlanta, birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Coca-Cola, home of the Morris Brown Wolverines, the Morehouse Maroon Tigers, and the High-Flying Falcons, it's the Dr. William Lester Show. I am, of course, your host, the man for which the show is named, and I want to welcome you to this weekly foray into all things unexplained, unusual, thought-provoking, and fascinating. We're here each week on GameCon Radio, so be sure that you are tuned in to talk radio for the 21st century. The show is produced and engineered by the legendary Michael Old Hip Johnson, a.k.a. the Paranormal Outsider. And boy, I tell you, here we are, just 1 week out from Halloween, and as a week from today, as a matter of fact. Next Saturday night is All Hallows Eve, Halloween, and I thought I would do something tonight that was kind of reminiscent of some of the things I did on my show when I first started. And I'll tell you, before I started booking guests, when I was brand new to talk radio, I would come on the air and I would share paranormal stories, scary stories, ghost stories, stories of the unexplained, stories of the unknown, etc. With the audience. It was a lot of fun. And now here we go. Old Hip has already instigated a potential problem in the chat room, and by saying that he's going to dress up for Halloween as the Georgia Bigfoot. However, I'm not taking the bait, and I'm not going to go off on a rip and a tear on our Georgia Bigfoot hoax of about a year ago. However, back to my original thought. Over the last year or so, I have been compiling stories, reports, personal experiences from people all over. And I'd like to share some of them with you tonight as kind of a lead-in to Halloween. And so I'm going to start. Well, maybe I should start with my college football report, because this is another exciting day of college football. So before we get into that, I will tell you that the number 1 ranked Florida Gators are right now engaged with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Florida's up now 16-13 with about 10 minutes to go in the game. Old Hip, I did not catch Notre Dame. Did they pull out a win today? I don't know if he can hear me. But Hip, if you can hear me, let me know if Notre Dame won the game today. And we're still waiting for USC, and who are they playing? Arizona.
I'm sorry, I was getting me something to drink.
Oh, okay.
To be honest with you, I've been too busy today around the house. I never even checked it out.
Oh, okay. I know they played earlier. I haven't seen a score on them. I was just updating. Okay, so we have, like I said, we have Florida and Mississippi State at a 16-13 Florida. Florida just scored again, so it's 22-13 Florida. So it looks like they're going to win, although there are still 9 minutes to go. All right. Want to say hello to Smoochie in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. And White Wolf, two of our chat room regulars. Let's see what we've got first. I want to start with a story uh, from Australia. Weird little story. Sent to me by, and some of these people give their screen names, and some of them just send a first name and an initial or whatever. But this one is from a screen name called Freaky Bacon. Okay, and here we go. She says, I come from Canberra in Australia. And she says, just out of Canberra on the way to Sydney, there's a huge lake called Lake George. These days, as Canberra and its surrounding area is faced with one of its worst droughts in years, you would never guess that not that long ago it was filled with water, at times overflowing onto the road. Many people spent fun summers fishing and swimming there, but not everyone had such happy times. Many people lost their lives there, and there are stories about ghostly sightings that go around Canberra. One of the best known is that if you drive past the Lake George at night by yourself and look into the rear view mirror, you'll see someone sitting in the back seat of your car. Boy, I tell you. Now that
Good news. I'm
yes,
sorry, good news. Notre Dame over Boston, 20-16.
that Boston College.
Yes.
Okay. So Notre Dame took down Boston College, which is great because Boston College is an ACC team, and that helps out Georgia Tech, who also pummeled Virginia today. Uh, I watched that game early. Virginia had no business on the field today with the Yellow Jackets. Uh, but back to the story. You know, that old thing about looking in the rearview mirror and seeing somebody sitting in your back seat, man, how much does that creep you out? You know, it says there's also been reports of ghost trucks and cars that drive along the highway late at night when few cars are traveling. That's a creepy story. Here's one from Indiana, from the town of Kokomo. We have many urban legends. In fact, there's one in particular. The story is set on Old Sycamore Road, which is an old road in farmland, an open field. There's a small bridge off Old Sycamore Road that takes you onto another road, and it takes you to the next town. The story goes that a young man or a boy fell off the bridge and died once hitting their head on the rocks underneath the bridge. And if you were to drive on Old Sycamore Road at night and you were to cross that bridge, then the ghost would appear next to your car once you pass the exact spot they had fallen from that point until you exit the bridge. This person writing in, who uses the name John, says, my friends and I have tested this legend many times and we've yet to see anything. We don't even know if anyone died there, but true or false, it's an interesting and eerie story and visual. And that is submitted by John from Indiana. Okay, let's see what we have next. Here's one from West Virginia, which of course we all know is the land of Mothman and many other strange goings on. In Fairmont, West Virginia, there's a small house, and rumor has it that the house is haunted. This comes to us, by the way, from Heather. And she says, my mom told me a story about when she was a young girl. The house was occupied by a family who no one really knew anything about. Everyone in the neighborhood was afraid of them. My mom went to school with the youngest girl in the family, who looked tired all of the time and never spoke a word. Her dad was even more scarier and looked as if he was always mad. Huh. The girl seemed afraid of him. Nobody thought this was unusual because everyone was afraid of him until one night. The police were at the house, but the neighbors didn't know why they were there. The next day, my mom and her classmates found out what had happened. The father came home that night drunk and beat his wife and children to death. Then he went into his truck, set it on fire, and shot himself in the head. Now they say if you go anywhere near the house, you can hear the painful screams of the family being brutally murdered by the father. Wow. It's a horrible story. Huh. Next, we have a story from across the pond in Scotland, and it's not about the Loch Ness Monster. There was a couple in Scotland who just moved into an old castle, conveniently enough. When they moved in, they decided to empty out the wine cellar and found this large barrel of brandy, which is, in my mind, great cause for celebration. Um, they tried moving it and even got a few friends around to help, but they could not budge it. In the end, they decided to have a housewarming party and give glasses of brandy out to empty the barrel and make it easier to move. A few days after the party, they went into the cellar and tried to move the barrel again. It still wouldn't move. The husband went to get his saw in order to cut it into smaller pieces, and it turns out they cut off the top of the barrel. Inside was a dead body, and they had actually drank the brandy that had preserved it. Jeez. That story was submitted to us by Angel Cutsforth. A fairly disgusting, absurd story, but very eerie and entertaining.
Dr. Lester, I have a
Yes.
question.
Yes, sir.
Does that make the gentleman pickled?
I guess so. I mean, yeah. I mean, the
I
guy
couldn't
was
resist. I couldn't
what?
resist.
But I mean, technically, the guy had to be pickled. But apparently, there's no comment on it. But apparently, there was no comment on the taste of the brandy. Uh, so the the corpse left no discernible taste in the brandy. And after all, taste is what matters, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yes. Uh, the next one we have comes to us from New York, upstate New York, which has a rich tradition of weird goings on. And this one is submitted to us by Brittany. On an isolated road around midnight in upstate New York, a man and his girlfriend are driving. Uh oh. Suddenly, a car approaches them from behind. Pull over, the man says. The man shrugs and turns in a dirt road. He gets out and walks to the man. What is it, babe? The girlfriend asks, but she gets no answer. She shrugged and continued to browse through the different radio stations. Then she heard a crash, and she said hesitantly, Hey, baby, can you hear anything? She ran out of the car and saw her boyfriend's head bouncing back and forth on the radio antenna. The backlights were smashed in. Screaming, she goes to her cell phone and gets out of the car. As soon as she opens the car door, she hears, No use. No one will answer you. Man, I tell you. I mean, those, there's something about those stories about no one will answer you, no one will respond to you. Uh, there's something about that. And don't even get me started on the guy's head bouncing around. Um, Really creepy. Really creepy. Really creepy. Let's see. How about a story from Mexico? How about a story from Mexico? It is said that in Mexico there's a ghost of a woman who drowned her kids. Oh my God. They call her the crybaby because she cries a lot. She is a wandering spirit looking for her kids. Well, lady, you know what? They're in the bottom of the lake where you left them. If you misbehave with your parents, she will visit you. She will come out if you're near a pile of water and scream, "Oh, my children." Also, it's believed it's not safe to look her in the face, and if you do, death will follow. The part about the woman drowning her kids is true. And this person says, I think that the other part of her coming out of the water is true. If you encounter her, I would recommend putting on some earplugs and running away from her. Submitted by Freddie Martinez. Gee whiz, drowning her own kids. On Halloween 2003, my family and I went into the city because my mom had bought a car and she needed to make a car payment to the dealer. We decided to take my little sister and her friend trick-or-treating out there in the same area. My mom made her payment and my sister and her friend were trick-or-treating. It was getting late, so we decided that that was enough. We had a long drive back home. When we were on the freeway, a car was driving right next to us and the driver was wearing a mask, staring right at us. Everybody started to get scared. He was keeping up with us and had his head turned sideways, staring for about 10 minutes. Then he looked ahead and drove past us. And that was submitted by Maurice. Oh, man. Creeps you out. Creeps me out. Creeps me out. By the way, hello, Elfie. How you doing? Two 18-wheeler trucks were on a highway. Two trucks smashed into each other and all the people died. They took the trucks to the junkyard. A day later, it started to smell. Well, yeah. It got worse every day. Finally, they took apart the fused trucks and found a VW Beetle with the passenger still in there, dead. And that's submitted to us by Jessica. On a warm summer night, a couple of friends of mine and I stayed up until about 3 a.m. talking about scary stuff that had happened to us. One began telling us about a weird encounter that he had with a ghost or something supernatural. He said he was driving back home from Abilene to Laredo, Texas, when he saw a hitchhiker on the road. As he passed the woman, he looked back in the rearview mirror to catch a last glance, when to his surprise, the woman appeared to be sitting in his back seat. He must have been really tired of driving or something, but he just shook it off and continued on his way. Those hitchhiker stories scare me too. I just don't want anybody in the car with me that, any unauthorized passengers. That comes to us from Edmund. This next story comes to us from screen name Cocoa Puff. So I hope that doesn't mean cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. One day I was outside with my best friend at about 11:30 p.m. when all of a sudden we see a van drive next to us. He stops and looks like he's tweaking or something. I don't know what that means. We get all freaked out and start walking back to my house. He pulls up to my driveway, so we start running. He starts to get out of the van, and we notice that he has an ice pick in his left hand. So we start screaming, and luckily my dad was still up working late in his garage. So he opens up the garage and tackles the weirdo. He holds him there until the police show up. The cops tell us that we were lucky because we were the only ones to make it out of the 6 people he's tried the same thing on. We don't stay out late anymore. And that comes to us from Cocoa Puffs. Please. Here's a weird one that comes to us from Elise. On Halloween night, a 16-year-old girl named May and her friends Irene, Kate, and Leslie were out driving to a Halloween party outside of town. So, of course, they took the freeway. The car was slowing down like it was running out of gas, but the meter said it was full. May and Leslie went to check out the engine. When they opened the hood, there was a hand, a lone, bare hand. They were so frightened they couldn't scream. Leslie reached out to touch it, and then it moved. This time they both screamed, and Irene and Kate ran out of the car screaming. They said that there was a man with his flesh torn and a missing hand on the back seat. The girls ran, and the car began chasing them slowly. May called her parents, and Irene called 911 on their cell phones as they ran. But when the cops and May's parents came, all 4 girls were soaking in blood, not their own blood. The cops found a black gemstone, unidentified, in the driver's seat, covered with blood. The girls went ahead to the party. The address was just a vacant lot, but in that vacant lot were many bloody, black, unidentified gemstones. Now, I can't for 1 second tell you what the hell this story means. But again, it was submitted to us by Elise. And here, yes, Old Hip says that in the background he can hear the hounds of stately Leicester Manor. And well, they're not our hounds. They are the hounds of some of my less stately neighbors. I'm joking, of course. They actually have some fantastic young black labs, and you know how young dogs are. They do a lot of barking, and what I do sometimes when I'm doing the show from my studio, which is of course deep below stately Leicester Manor, I kick the door open to let some wonderful, cool, crisp fall air in, and the Labradors are making their presence felt. So it's not the Hound of the Baskervilles, it's not the Wolfman. It's just a couple of black labs making their presence felt. So there you go. I bet they don't get Dr. Lester's steak. You better damn well believe that. They will not get Dr. Lester's steak. Let's move on. This is fun. Now, and keep in mind, folks, I get these things sent in to me, and I can't vouch for the veracity of any of this material. I knew it would be fun. I knew it would be a little creepy. I knew that it would be amusing, a wonderful Halloween activity, and it's fun. So now here's one submitted to me by screen name Scary Freak. Go figure, right? One night, these kids were coming home from a party, and there was a cemetery about 1 block away from home. One kid was telling the others about a local legend. If you go and stand on the grave for 10 seconds and stab a knife into it, that a hand will grab you and pull you into the grave with the corpse. One girl was brave enough to do it for $20. Obviously, this was a girl who think small. She got a knife, walked to a grave, stood on it, and stabbed the knife into it. Suddenly, her leg felt heavy, and she tried to pick it up. But something was grabbing her. She was yelling and crying for help, but her friends thought she was kidding, so they just left. Next day, they found out that she had died of fright. She thought that somebody was grabbing her, but the knife she was using had pierced her pants and held her there. Creepy? Uh, sure. Uh, but a little far-fetched. I don't know about that. Hmm. And that's submitted by Scary Freak. There's a factory behind a middle school in Dallas, Texas. One day, four girls were walking home from the movie theater that used to be there before the school. When they were in the middle of the field, two girls said they needed to use the restroom. They didn't want to go back to the theater, so they decided to climb over the fence and use the restroom at the factory. The two girls went while the other two stayed to help them over the fence. After 20 minutes, the two remaining girls heard deadly screams from their friends. They ran, and their friends were never seen again. Today, the factory still remains, and it's said that if you cross the fence border, you too will never be seen again. And that's submitted to us by Laura. That's a weird one. Here's one I heard on the radio from a woman who told her story about seeing a ghost, which is scary. This comes to us from Cindy. A few years ago, the woman and her family just moved to a new house somewhere in Melbourne, Australia. One night, her baby son was crying, so she got out of bed and went to see him. Suddenly, the baby stopped crying. The woman knew that he must have fallen asleep, so she went back to bed. A few hours later, the baby cried again, so she got up and went over to check again. As she opened the door to her son's room, she saw a boy, about 6 or 7 years old, calming the baby down. When he saw the woman, he disappeared. The woman was shocked and later told her neighbors what had happened. The neighbors already knew about the ghost and told her that there was a boy who died from an illness about 80 years ago and was buried under the exact place where her baby's son's room is. Wow. A creepy / touching story. Creepy story. Now, the next story actually comes to us from the state of Minnesota. And it involves, got a little bit of a cryptozoological angle, I think, because it talks about a subject that I have find very interesting, and it is about living or creatures that, by all accounts, should be extinct, but from time to time are seen alive in the modern era. And of course, we have all kinds of conventional examples of that. But when we come back from the break, I want to share with you this very weird story from Minnesota. In fact, just a little preview, we have this weird story from Minnesota. We want to talk about an encounter with the goat man, which is creepy. Attacks from evil spirits. We got a werewolf sighting. We have other sightings of prehistoric creatures in modern times, and a story about a witch. So all of that is going to be coming up here on the GameCon Radio Network. This is the Dr. William Lester Show. Tonight we're doing things a little bit different. This is what we did when we first started the show more than a year ago when it was called Dimension X. And some nights we would come on and share these weird, amusing, creepy, scary anecdotes with the audience. And so I decided to revisit that tradition. And it's fun. We haven't done this in a while. So again, this is Dr. William Lester Show. We're on the GameCon Radio Network, and we will be right back at you after a short timeout.
Whoever said size does not matter, never heard of us. We give it to you hard and fast. GameCon Radio. We rock your game.
Yes? Hi, I'm here for the New York Ghost Tour.
Sorry, we're closed. But you can come back next week.
Next week? Forget that. I'll just go check out another place.
Trust me, there's no place half as interesting as ours, dear.
That's so not true. What about the Shanley Hotel in Napanock?
Once you've been to one haunted hotel, you've been to them all.
Not like this place. The Shanley Hotel dates back to 1845, and since then it's been a hotspot for paranormal activity. Mysterious music, smells, whistling, doors opening, footsteps. Almost everything you can imagine has been experienced at that hotel.
It's open to the public?
Absolutely. Sal and Cindy, the owners of the hotel, welcome people for regular stays or investigations, and their rates are beyond reasonable. They even offer workshops and in-house psychics.
How did you learn about this place?
By visiting www.shanleyhotel.com. You can get history, investigation info, and much more.
Thanks, I think I will. Just don't tell any of our customers.
Hey, I'm Bill Staten, your resident Beatles expert. I listen to GameCon Radio. Why? Because it's cool. I listen to it. You should too. That's GameCon Radio. I'll see you there.
And we are back live on the Dr. William Lester Show, live from the city of Atlanta on this late October evening, 1 week away from All Hallows Eve. A lot of fun and frivolity. And tonight, I have been revisiting, I guess, what amounts to a show tradition. When I first started this program, it was entitled Dimension X, which, of course, uh, had been the title of a book that I had written in 2004. And so I just thought it was an excellent, way to correlate things and tie things up all in a neat package. And in the very early days of the program, I would come on and share with the listeners these stories and anecdotes and experiences that I had kind of compiled over the years, and sort of got away from that as the show progressed. I got into having different guests on the air to talk about different subjects, which is also, a fun and cool thing to have. But I decided that we hadn't done this in a long time, and it was something that I enjoyed doing. It was something that my listeners really enjoyed. It was very personal and very personable because essentially it was me and you just kind of sharing these stories, and I would watch the chat room and monitor the listeners' reactions, and so it's a lot of fun. So again, tonight it's just me and you. Now, you think dinosaurs are extinct? Uh, I would say for the most part, yes, except for this interesting story from the state of Minnesota. And this gentleman claims to have seen a creature that once he describes it, I think you will recognize. And he says, recently while driving to work, I witnessed something that really shook me up. I work with the Minnesota DNR as a watercraft inspector. It was 11:40 a.m., September 12th. Skies were partly cloudy. This account occurred 8.8 miles south of Emily, Minnesota, on County Road 6, just to give you a good idea where it is. I was driving to the Roosevelt Access and was about 15 to 20 minutes away from arriving when in the distance I saw what appeared to be a blue heron flying over a marsh. Not that unusual. As I drove closer, I was shocked to see how big this, quote, blue heron was. This bird was huge. Unlike the blue heron, when it flies, this bird had its neck held out straight. I leaned forward as it flew west over the road in front of my vehicle and over the power lines. Now, compared to the power lines, this thing was huge. Its wingspan was probably as long as half the size of this power pole, around 15 or 20 feet. It continued to glide, turning to the right and parallel with my vehicle. Since it had a long extended neck, I thought maybe it's a sand hill crane. So now you see what's happening. This guy's trying to force this thing into being something explainable, which is a typical response. Then I noticed the beak, which was much longer than a sandhill's. The beak was long, with what appeared to be teeth sticking out of its sides. The long neck curled in slightly and then curled out, turning its head back and forth as if it was searching the ground for prey, like a raptor. Its feet were held straight behind its body, and it was dark in color. I was also looking for feathers, but I could not see any. There was another vehicle following closely behind me, but I doubt he witnessed the creature because he seemed to be in a hurry. Once I drove up the hill, I turned around and saw the creature glide behind the tree line. When I reached the bottom of the hill, the bird was nowhere to be seen. I waited about a minute, but now I really regret not staying longer, even though I would have been late for work. I could hardly believe what I saw. My head and eyes were conflicting with one another. But I know what I saw, and I know it was not like any of North America's native bird fauna. I believe I saw a pterosaur like creature, or perhaps the legendary thunderbird. Wow. So, I've heard of these sightings of these pterosaurs before, and it makes you wonder, uh, why isn't it possible? Why isn't it possible that some of these prehistoric flying reptiles somehow, some way managed to survive the extinction event 65 million years ago and continue to maintain a stable breeding population? Just enough of a breeding population, perhaps, to be sighted every now and again. Why isn't that possible? Hmm. Now, this one troubles me. The Goat Man. This event took place in Shafter, Texas in 1964. And the writer goes on to say, my older brother at the time was about 17 years old. He and three other friends took off from our hometown, Alpine, Texas, to go into Ojinaga, Mexico, about 89 miles away. I hope they got some good tequila down there. They had to pass through the ghost town mentioned above, Ojinaga. On their way back home, my brother was driving and his friends were asleep. After Shafter, Texas, there is a long overpass across a dry creek. This town is located between mountains and is extremely dark at night. My brother stated that as he was about to cross this overpass, he noticed this person asking for a ride. He stated that he slowed down, but as the car lights hit the ground from the slowing down, he noticed that this man had goat's feet. He stated that he floored the gas pedal and took off praying. Oh my goodness. He stated that this woke up his friends and they asked what was wrong. He stated that he would tell them when they got home. I remember telling him and my mom, and for quite a while he would not go to sleep with the lights off or go out late at night alone. I've heard goat man stories before, but man, that's weird. What's up with that? You see some guy with cloven hooves? Mm, the goat man. This next story comes to us all the way from Dusseldorf, Germany. Hmm. It is as follows. I'm 35 years old, and I guess this took place when I was 5 or 6. I can't tell exactly because I was so small. Huh. I always thought that my experiences are too embarrassing to tell, but after reading many experiences and realizing that there are many people who have similar or even stranger experiences, I decided to tell you this story. And we're so glad that he decided to share this. I have actually 2 stories to tell. One about a black creature in my bedroom. The second one is about being attacked by evil. Hmm. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I had a strange encounter with a shadow man in my bedroom. I woke up because I heard footsteps, and when I looked around, I saw a dark figure moving in a circle in the middle of my room. The room was not too dark, and I could still see everything, but I could not see the figure's face or clothes, a troubling development to say the least. And what is up with this? What is this walking around in a circle? You know, is there any chance that this is something that's not evil? You see what I mean? This thing is in the middle of the room walking around in a circle. There's no chance this is an evil, right? Okay, so let's see what happens. Half asleep, I thought it was my dad's shadow at first, but why would he move in a circle in my room and in the middle of the night? Not sure who it was, I asked, or I called out, Papa, but it didn't reply. Then I saw he was much taller than both my mom and my dad. I started to realize it was neither of my parents nor my brother, who is 1 year younger than I, and I didn't dare to ask again. That was a great move. I was totally scared when I realized it, and I hid behind the bed shield that prevents a person from falling out of the upper deck of the bunk bed. My place was the upper deck while my brother was sleeping in the lower deck. All the time, I was wondering who this figure was, and I thought there must be a logical explanation. Yeah, the explanation is it's a creepy, diabolical entity from the nether regions. Sir, that's the explanation. But he finishes, but I could not find any. I was also telling myself that I was dreaming. I had nightmares before, but normally either I had woken up and realized it was a dream, or remembered in the morning it had been one. But this time the dream was realistic, and it didn't come to an end. I continued to hear footsteps, and when I looked at it again, I was still there. I was still there. It was still there, moving in a circle. It felt like it was walking there for an eternity, and I thought to myself, "Please go away." But it kept walking. Every few minutes, I looked at it again, and it was still there. I then looked down to the lower deck where my brother was sleeping. I guess I wanted to ask him if he was seeing the same thing, but to my surprise, he wasn't there. I thought, oh my God, now I'm alone with this monster. I would have thought that quite some time ago. Now it scared me even more. I tried not to move so that it would not spot me. I covered my head under the blanket, closed my eyes, and listened to the footsteps. Then, after what felt like hours, I fell asleep. Now, how he fell asleep in this situation, I have no idea. In the morning, the first thing I did was to see if the creature was still there, but it was gone. My parents and my brother were up already, so I asked my parents if they entered my room in the night. They said that they hadn't. Then I asked my brother where he was in the night, and he said he had moved to my parents' bed. So the fact that my brother was not there was actually true. Even now, 30 years later, when I remember back, I could swear I didn't dream the black figure. If this was just a dream, then it was the strangest dream because I never had a dream like this again in the last 30 years. I talked to my brother recently, and he still remembers when I told him my story. But at that time, he thought that I had only dreamed it. Now, 30 years later, he said he believes the encounter was real. Wow. And that's his first story. And remember, he said he had another encounter. He says, this second story took place this year, March 2009, while he was on a business trip to Zeven, Germany. Zeven, Zeven, Germany. Again, it was night, but what I experienced this time was completely different. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I was sweating. A strange nightmare woke me up. I say strange because when I woke up, I didn't remember what I had dreamed. I just felt fear and a dark and evil presence. When I woke up, I still felt something was in the room, and it paralyzed me. Something held me, but nothing visible, and I could not move. I felt an evil sensation that I had never felt before, and I started to panic because I felt something pressed me with a strong force. Not physically, though, more mental. I thought to myself, how can I wake up from a nightmare that I do not remember right after waking up and still be scared? I couldn't explain, and then the sensation became stronger and stronger, and I thought, please, someone help me. I'm going to die. Firstly, I never thought before I would die. Secondly, die from what? Until now, I still cannot believe why I thought I would die. I didn't see anything, only felt something evil that attacked me mentally. It just got into my brain. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear voices or recognize bad memories, nor am I depressive or have any trauma. I thought to myself again, how can I be scared of something I do not see or imagine? But the fact is, I was scared to death. The man goes on. Then, when I thought this is the end, all of a sudden my dad's face appeared in a bright light. It could not be his spirit because he is still alive. I remember I was surprised and wondered why he appeared and so lively, not like in a picture, like he was there. He was smiling at me and said, "Don't worry, just pray." We are Buddhists and we pray when we want to be protected. Although my parents are very religious people, I had not been practicing for a long time because I had been a skeptical person about religions. But this time I prayed, even though I thought skeptically, why would this help now? I chanted a mantra for 3 times, which takes only a few seconds, and as soon as I finished the mantra, the evil sensation was gone in a split second. I couldn't believe how it was gone when I thought I would just die moments before, but the room suddenly seemed so peaceful, and I couldn't sleep again without fear. I could sleep again without fear, excuse me. I didn't see my dad's face anymore, but I thanked my dad for protecting me. I can imagine some people laughing at my stories now, but do you think I can laugh at this experience? And he says, hell no. I really don't want to experience this again. It scared me even more than the black figure. And he concludes his report by saying he is deadly serious. Any of something like that ever happened to you? You ever have an encounter with these sinister, dark figures? Or you ever wake up from something that you believe was a nightmare, but for whatever reason, can't remember what it was about, and it still troubles you? Or have you ever had like recurring nightmares? You know, which kind of make you think that there's some meaning to it, or there's something real behind it. Just a thought. Now, you know that one of my favorite subjects, you know what, I'm going to save this one till after we come back from the break because you know I love stories about werewolves. In fact, I know that coming up we're going to have Miss Linda Godfrey on. I think not next week, but the week after. I think November the 7th we'll have Linda Godfrey on, who's the author of The Beast of Bray Road. We had her on last year, and I thought it'd be cool to call her back and share those stories with you, actual stories of actual werewolves on the loose in the wilds of the American Midwest. So please look out for that show coming up in a couple of weeks. So we'll do the werewolf story when we come back from the break. But right now, this is a story. And the title of this story is called The Cornfield Creature. And it goes thusly. I used to work at a cheese factory on the edge of a cornfield in southwestern Minnesota, or Minnesota. That's how they say it, right? There were a series of days in the summer of 2004, 2005 where it was so hot that the milk being delivered to us in trucks would evaporate before we got it. It made work easy. The dearth of milk denied us any actual labor, but management wouldn't let us not come to work, so we would show up and mess around all shift. I was working nights at the time. It was 2 or 3 a.m. And I was out on the loading dock watching bats fly around the floodlights because I like being out in the cool night air. The corn was about as high as my shoulder, so about 5'10". As I was watching the bats, I looked down at the edge of the cornfield. Something was moving there. It was the size of a small child and very, very skinny. It was pale with something that looked like a head of straight black hair. It moved in a sort of jerky gait, like someone dancing the robot badly. It moved in chunks too, legs, then hips, then torso, shoulders, neck, and finally head. It was looking back into the cornfield, or at least I felt like it was. I felt prickly all over. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a heron or something at first, but it looked too much like a person. It didn't move like a person, though. Gradually, step by step, it moved toward me, letting my curiosity get the better of my fear. I moved toward the edge of the dock, which was raised a few feet off the ground to connect with the semis. When I got within a few feet of the edge, the thing looked at me. I was paralyzed. I could have run, but I was stuck somewhere between terrified and intrigued. It moved its face, still pointing at me. It ratcheted its body in that disconcerting, jerky movement kind of way toward the cornfield and then went into it. I tried to watch where the field moved as it passed, but the corn remained perfectly still. I noticed that all the crickets were silent. After a few minutes, nothing happened. I stood out there for an hour, but it never came back. And I never saw it again. What the hell did he see? Now, you know what? First thing I thought, when he said it was, skinny and 3 feet tall, I mean, makes you think it's some kind of little alien thing, because that's very often how these alien creatures seem to be described to us in close encounter stories. So I'm not necessarily saying that it was for sure an alien, but that description is consistent with other reports of alleged ETs, and that weird herky-jerky locomotion, very disconcerting body movements, may have been an indication of some kind of mechanical device. I don't know, but certainly a a hair-raising encounter, to say the least. Coming up, we're going to have a story of a demon of Witch Hill and the werewolf story, and another sighting of a prehistoric creature, and other true stories, including time slips, the dancing demon, Gettysburg ghosts, and the little people of Oklahoma, just to name a few. So, you're listening to the Dr. William Lester Show. We are coming at you from the beautiful city of Atlanta, Georgia. It is a wonderfully cool, crisp October evening, 1 week away from Halloween. And we'll be right back on the show on the GameCon Radio Network after a short break.